Influencers. They live incredible lives. They're beautiful. They have beautiful friends. They have fun every day, tons of disposable income. They travel the world and they don't answer to anyone. They're what we think about when we fantasize about living a free life with no obligations, and they get to be adored by millions simply for living their best life. What an influencer is kind of up for debate. It could be someone who vlogs about their life, does pranks, does makeup tutorials, ASMR, or they could just be conventionally attractive. Influencers are almost on every social network that you can think of, but the platforms where they have the greatest presence are on TikTok, Instagram, and of course, right here on YouTube. Influencers are arguably some of the most watched independently produced creators on YouTube right now, especially after Vine shut down and a slew of refugees migrated to it to create longer form videos to move away from the 6-second format. And despite being in its infancy, TikTok has quickly become the place where hundreds of influencers have amassed huge audiences in a very short amount of time. This includes people such as Jake and Logan Paul, Gabby Hanna, David Dobrik, James Charles, Amanda Cerny, Mr. Beast, etc. But it also includes conventional celebrities such as The Rock, Cristiano Ronaldo, Selena Gomez, Kylie and Kendall Jenner, Beyoncé, Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift, and many, many more. For bigger, more established celebrities, places like Instagram serve as a way to peek into the lives outside of our television and movie screens. For a long time, the public has had a perverse interest in what the rich and famous do in their spare time, and there was a time where the only way that you could get an idea of this was through celebrity magazines or websites. But social networks have become a new window into their lives that feels a lot more intimate and personal, like they're a friend that you're catching up with. Under the surface of the glossy lives of influencers, there are forces at work to manipulate you though, to make you question how you live your own life. The kind of things that you buy, what you wear, how you look, and even how you feel. You could say that this is simply a byproduct of looking at the lives of people who are supposedly happier than you. After all, I'm sure many of us have looked at a real friend's feed and begun to question how their life turned out so much more fun and interesting than yours. But influencers' careers thrive off this feeling. That envy helps them profit financially and socially. For these relationships to be maintained, there exists a blurred line between the influencer and the follower, one that makes it so their audience feels like they have a genuine connection with them, but are forever kept at a distance, remaining a voyeur. So why are influencers so popular? How are they affecting the lives of people, especially children and teenagers? What's the appeal of peering into the lives of the wealthy, and how does this desire to be like them damage people, making them feel envious, insecure, and alone? Let's take a look at why influencers are making you miserable and how they're doing it on purpose. In a survey conducted by the Harris Poll in 2019, 3,000 children across the UK, US and China were asked what they wanted to be when they grew up. There were the typical answers you'd expect, such as teacher, athlete, pop star, etc. But 30% of kids in the UK and 29% in the US wanted to be a YouTuber or vlogger. This isn't all too surprising. Although YouTube is watched by billions of people of different age ranges across the world, children and teenagers spend the most time on it more than any other age demographic. It used to be the case where parents were criticized for letting television babysit their children, but it's not the case anymore. Children will now be given a tablet or their parents' phone to consume endless hours of content, all the while making their screens unspeakably filthy. But I can understand why parents who are exhausted by looking after a being with seemingly endless reserves of energy might be inclined to want a moment to themselves and hand over a 6-inch screen to keep their child occupied, if only for an hour or two. Because of this though, children are exposed to the world of YouTubers and other influencers from a very young age. They could be watching all sorts of content, including cartoons that are automatically generated by an algorithm, or utterly bizarre videos of adults dressed in cheap superhero and Disney costumes, where Elsa from Frozen is pregnant with Spider-Man's baby. Although thankfully that kind of content has been addressed in the past couple of years since it bordered into the questionable. Most importantly though, vloggers and influencers are incredibly popular among children and teens. There's a reason why influencers are so appealing to younger audiences, and it's because they live their lives pretty much like they're forever young. They're what kids would like to be when they're an adult. Their lives are seemingly devoid of consequences, other than possibly being demonetized by YouTube. But even then, that only happens in extreme cases, since they only tend to punish smaller creators for making content that they deem unsuitable for advertisers, whatever that means. YouTube is such a great platform at reaching through to children for many reasons. One big one is that you don't require an account to watch its content, unlike Instagram and TikTok, which require you to be at least 13 years of age. And kids don't really care about ads, whereas adults are a bit more averse to them and may be likely to close a video should it contain too many ads, or skip them if the function has been enabled. Because of the age restrictions to register on Instagram and TikTok, those platforms have become the place where teenagers and young adults are exposed to and seek out influencers. But if you grew up watching YouTube, there's a very high likelihood that you'll continue to do so as you get older, since it offers a sense of comfort and familiarity. A place that you can visit when you're bored and just want to watch the content of someone that you may have known since you were a child, or even someone that you've recently discovered. We all take comfort in the familiar, whether it's content creators or watching something like The Office for the 80th time. It's like slipping into that nice, comfy sweater that you've owned for years, or returning to your bed at home after being at a hotel for a week. There's nothing necessarily wrong in finding comfort in content though. I personally rewatch some of my favourite shows all the time along with some movies, and I have a Spotify playlist with nearly 650 hand-picked songs, each of which I've heard countless times, but when I'm bored or working, I'll put it on in the background and listen to them again. Familiarity is core to developing relationships with people. This can include your in-person friends, online friends, influencers, and even fictional characters that you identify with. Just look at how many videos and images and GIFs there are shared with characters from movies and TV with a caption claiming that they're a mood. With regular people that you can regularly talk to and interact with, whether that is hanging out in person, a group DM, or a voice chat on Discord, or even playing online games with them, these are by definition actual relationships. Regardless of whether you have a physical presence with these people, you're still able to actively interact with them, become familiar, and develop genuine bonds. Some people may argue that if you've never met a friend in the flesh, then it doesn't count, but it's become evident that that simply isn't true, and the internet has facilitated relationships with people in other countries that were once extremely hard and expensive to maintain. In the early days of social networks, they were designed in such a way that the kind of content that you saw was largely from the people that you mutually agreed to be friends with. Sites like MySpace had celebrities on it, but they didn't really have any kind of engagement with audiences. Same for artists or bands. The site once served as a great way to keep up to date with new music, but other than a few promotional photos here and there, it was pretty much just a glorified website for them. There were some people who did become public figures because of MySpace. Believe it or not, makeup influencer and dumpster fire Jeffree Star, one of the biggest names in the influencer sphere, actually started out there, but it wasn't anywhere near as effective as making figures as big as him, especially compared to sites like Instagram, TikTok, etc. Same goes for Facebook. In its early days, its main function was to simply connect friends and family until it turned into the fascist propaganda machine that it is now. When Twitter came along, it gave birth to a new social media format, where rather than just using the platform to connect with friends and family, you could follow any account that you wanted unless they had some kind of barrier in place, which requires giving you permission to follow them. Although traditional celebrities quickly amassed followers on Twitter and then later Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok, influencers, people who are strangers to everyone and had never been seen on screen before or had been spoken about by much of anyone, came to fruition. As mentioned previously, there are all kinds of reasons why people follow influencers, but as more people join these new platforms, they look for someone to follow other than their friends. Because of how engagement works on social media, the more a figure is engaged with, the likelier they are to be seen by people who haven't heard from them. Thanks to people sharing and liking posts, it's a web of connections, and at some point you might be exposed to them via a friend or even an algorithm that recommends them to you. Now, this isn't to say that influencers don't deserve their audience necessarily, and that goes for most of them. I'm not in a position to say who people should actually be following. I will say though, and this is just me speaking, some influencers make some of the worst comedy I have ever seen. Most punchlines involve just being excessively horny or lying to your partner along with cheating on them. Some of them also make light of sexual harassment, treat homosexuality as a joke, and perpetuate the idea that sexist and misogynistic behavior is just one of those things that guys do. I generally tried my best not to make people feel bad for enjoying things, but this stuff is just, it's awful in every way. It's not even ironically funny. My point is that there is a snowball effect at play, where channels and people can be actively pushed upon you. You may have even found this video because YouTube decided that you might find it interesting. As these audiences are amassed though, it can lead people to believe that there's something special about these people, that they're worth knowing and giving your time and attention to. All these factors can lead to what is called a parasocial relationship, where over time you develop a sense of kinship with influencers or creators. It can begin to feel like they're a friend who understands you, talks about relatable situations or feelings, or they just remind you of the kind of friendship that you may want. This is mostly one way though. Influencers may occasionally like comments left on their posts or even replies, and they may regularly tell their audience how much they love them. That can be genuine. When I thank my subscribers and Patreon supporters, I really do mean it, because I wouldn't be where I am without them. Oh, and that includes all the people that leave me comments calling me a soy boy. Thanks for the engagement. However, despite how meaningful this connection with a content creator may be, it's not a real relationship. To some of you this may sound obvious, but just think of how many people there are out there who are obsessive about some online figures. This isn't new too. Even in the past there were people who would plaster their walls with posters and pictures of conventional celebrities, buy memorabilia, rare or limited editions of their movies or music, collect autographs, or even get creepy looking tattoos. Influencers are just another form of celebrity, albeit ones that your parents have probably never heard of. Fans do all the same things that they would with old-fashioned celebrities, but they have a stronger bond with them because they come across as being a real person, and many are celebrated for being real. Parasocial relationships, especially the more passionate ones where people struggle to understand their distance from an influencer, can be exploited though, and that happens very, very frequently. Many influencers are extremely wealthy people, multimillionaires who have ascended from simply being a person to a brand, and of course, like many brands, they have something to sell you. On a platform like YouTube, money can be earned directly through revenue, and for many people including myself, external sites like Patreon serve as a way for you to support a creator directly, and possibly receive some benefits like early access to videos or behind the scenes stuff. On platforms like Instagram, however, it's a little different. Influencers can use their substantial platform to affiliate with brands that pay you to promote their products. However, when this is done, it's often in the guise of a regular post. Like it's the day in the life of this influencer who just happens to be talking about how much they love a certain skincare product or a green tea blackhead remover. These posts can be marked as sponsored, so there's some way to distinguish it from regular ones, but nonetheless, this is a recognizable face selling you something, like a celebrity advertising a makeup line or car insurance. People can do this on YouTube, TikTok, and other places too. Sponsored posting is incredibly common these days. On YouTube it can be a little different. Some creators will put a minute or so aside in their video to include what is very clearly a sponsored ad, but some will do what influencers do and incorporate it into their videos as just a thing that they happen to be using at this particular time. There are all kinds of ways of promoting a sponsored product, but for the sake of this argument, since we're talking about lifestyle influencers and the like, we'll be considering more subtle forms of promotion. Now, since people who follow influencers are accustomed to the kind of things they do, whether it's hanging out with friends, visiting somewhere nice, and so forth, the inclusion of a product in these situations can come across as extremely subtle, but this method is highly effective. In a study conducted by the University of Science and Technology in China, it was found that the stronger a parasocial relationship was with an online figure, the likelier they were to trust their recommendation and even derive satisfaction from purchasing it. It would also make them more likely to make a purchase out of impulse when it comes to these products, rather than doing their own research on its quality. Parasocial relationships with influencers can be incredibly strong. Just consider how when one of them says something controversial online, an army of followers will leap to their defense, leaving dozens of comments offering their support and replying to those being critical of them, calling them a hater or jumping through hoops to claim that they didn't mean what they said. It's that powerful bond with influencers that can make people open to believing everything that they say, and that includes whether you should buy a product that they put their name to. This also extends to merchandise that influencers produce as well. As their audiences grow, so does their brand, and they'll often branch out into other avenues of making money. It could be something like a clothing line or a makeup line, kitchen products, and even bathwater. Some influencers branch out into other fields too. For some reason, there's a bizarre trend of big-name influencers that begin music careers, many of which simply just aren't good at all. Just because you have millions of followers and can afford an expensive producer doesn't mean that you're a good singer. I don't think the majority of the world was chomping at the bit to hear dull songs by Tana Montague about how difficult it is to be rich and famous. And no, I don't care if I pronounced her name properly. Influencers using their platform, personality, and every person reputation to advertise products is a form of exploitation now. Imagine if you had a friend who you hung out with in real life, and when you did, they'd occasionally start promoting random products to you. Have you noticed how good my hair looks? It's this amazing new conditioner I've been using. You can get rid of those split ends if you give it a try. Whoa, you didn't have to come at me like that, Becky. My hair looks great, unlike whatever you've got going on up there. This would be a similar kind of thing, but when it's an influencer selling you something, they're not your friend, and they want to build their brand and get money out of you, pure and simple. Sure, you may want to support them because what they do may bring you some satisfaction, but as relationships go, only one person is emotionally validated. You might get a nice product that you might like and feel happy about buying, but they get your cash and your validation with one of these. Advertising has drastically evolved over the years. As trends have changed and new media platforms have emerged, marketing companies have been constantly coming up with new ways to reach through to people to manipulate them into buying something. The most lucrative demographic for advertisers is 18 to 49 years old, and given the rapid changes in technologies, it's become harder to reach through to them. Television used to be the most effective ways of reaching through to younger audiences with disposable income, but since millennials and Gen Z have started watching increasingly less TV, namely network and cable television, they've turned to platforms where these generations spend a huge chunk of their time, social media. Younger generations have become cynical about traditional advertising. It feels false, unrelatable, and a blatant attempt at getting money out of you. An influencer trying to sell you something, though, feels natural. They're happy, healthy, and wealthy, so buying this product that they endorse might give me a taste of that. Anyone who works in marketing will tell you that if you want to make someone susceptible to advertising, then you have to get through to them while they're young. And as you've probably guessed by now, this has led to influencers being an extremely effective vehicle for convincing young people to buy things. Young people who may be unhappy with what they currently have and envy the worry-free, financially and socially rich influencers that they follow. We live in a world where the pursuit of wealth and purchasing expensive goods is constantly promoted. The wealthiest people in the world have been worshipped for decades now. Many people are desperate to know the kinds of clothes they wear, the jewelry they have, the cars that they drive, the amount of bedrooms and bathrooms in their houses, or even how much they spend on groceries each week. People look to the wealthy for their wisdom as though they have an insight into the secrets of success that the majority of the world simply hasn't figured out yet. Like it's the words to a magic spell which can open a portal into a better life. It's okay to want nice things, it really is, but the goal of many corporations and advertisers is to make you feel insecure about what you have and to always want more, to put you in a vicious cycle where you're never truly satisfied with what you have. As a result of this, influencers have become the ideal way to sell you access to a better life. They're not billionaire tech CEOs, so they don't come across as an incredible intellect. They don't initially promote themselves on the back of being talented like an actor or musician, and they're not titans of something like the financial industry. They're a person, just like you, except they're not. They are successful and wealthy, but they built their platform by capitalizing on people's desire to connect and relate with another human being and tap into their other desires while they're at it. People may like looking at influencers because their life is fun and they find them funny, or they just like their personality and they might just be physically attracted to them, and having an interaction with an attractive person feels somewhat meaningful and validating. But regardless of this, influencers have just become another way to sell you a life that you've been told that you need, while pretending that you're their good friend who's supportive and understands them. It is exploiting your desire for companionship in a world where we've begun to feel more distant from each other and disenfranchised with our connections to each other, social standing, and wealth. What influencers do is designed to make you feel less alone, but it's a placebo. Your need for human connection is converted into a social status and financial gain for influencers. I'm not going to act like every influencer out there is rubbing their hands together in glee, thinking about how great it is to emotionally manipulate their fans for money, but this is just the nature of influencer culture. Of course, there are people out there who have millions of followers who don't earn a penny from their platform, but the rise of influencers on apps like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok has become the ideal way of indoctrinating younger generations to believe that in order to be happy in life, you require status and money. It becomes all the more poisonous when you consider that children and teens are growing up into conditions where wealth is becoming increasingly harder to come by, so they can end up in a position where they're constantly seeking to fulfill these desires but will never come close to doing so because the game is rigged against them. The majority of people will be stuck in this endless cycle of wanting but never receiving, then inevitably asking themselves, what am I doing wrong? I'm working hard, I try to be a good, hard-working person, but nothing seems to work. They may see themselves in some of those influencers as they're growing up and keep wondering, how did it turn out so well for them, but not for me? Capitalism and consumerism work hand in hand to keep the carrot on the stick dangling in front of you throughout your life, just close enough that it might feel possible to grab, and sometimes you may feel your fingers graze against it, but it'll never be yours. Influencers want to make you feel like one day you'll have that carrot and you'll be sunbathing on the balcony of your $20 million mansion, hanging out with them, both enjoying your delicious carrots. Okay, that metaphor got a bit weird, but you get where I'm coming from. As for how this could be addressed, well, it's simple. Don't pay attention to them. Like any other public figure, they gain power based upon the amount of people watching them. This is regardless of whether someone is doing something good or something bad. Just look at Donald Trump. His bid for presidency was considered ridiculous at the beginning, but after hours upon hours of screen time dedicated to the circus that was his campaign run, he gained enough attention to be considered a viable candidate by almost 63 million Americans. I've said this before in previous videos, but I'll say it again. Attention is currency. How someone gains that attention can vary, but regardless of that, it has some value. Now obviously it's not that simple. My audience is minuscule compared to pretty much every influencer. There's no way I could make a dent in their following. But more importantly, I have absolutely no say in how you live your life and would never claim to do so. If you enjoy following influencers, that's fine. Personally, I don't see the appeal, but if it's something that brings you joy in some form and it's not hurting you, then I'm not going to criticize you for it. But it could be hurting you. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that most of you, if not all of you, aren't obsessed with a particular influencer. Like, you wouldn't jump into the comment section and start screaming at people for saying something mean about them. There's one thing that I want you to remain mindful of, and that is to keep in mind that it is a one-way relationship. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that they're a friend, especially if you're one among millions of followers. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention myself at some point here. Now, I don't like to label myself as an influencer because 1, I hate the term, 2, my platform is tiny compared to the big names, and 3, I don't set out to create content that shows what an amazing life I'm leading. I just want to talk about the things that you like that might actually suck. And yes, before you can say it, I'm not very much fun at parties. However, with an audience comes influence. Brands become aware of that influence too, which is why as my subscriber count grew, I began receiving emails asking me if I'm willing to promote products for them. Some of which I've agreed to because I use those products myself and I like them, and because, well, I have to eat and pay bills. So the money can be very useful since being a small YouTuber can be financially inconsistent. So here's a point where I have to admit that even though I have a very small platform, I have used it in a similar fashion to influencers. It's the unfortunate nature of building a career out of a platform like this, especially when YouTube can demonetize your content seemingly for no reason, or someone can copyright claim your content despite the fact that it's fair use. Not only can stuff like this stall the growth of a channel, it can seriously harm your income, especially if you're a small channel that releases 1 or 2 videos a month like I do. I've had plenty of people say to me that I'm a hypocrite for being critical of capitalism and at the same time having ads in my videos and sponsorships, but like I said, living isn't free. Capitalism isn't a voluntary system, and if you enjoy the content I produce, I hope that you can accept the strings attached, because otherwise I couldn't do this. And unlike influencers, I can't churn out 10-minute videos 7 times a week talking about my life or reacting to TikTok compilations. I guess what I'm saying is I understand the nature of this system and I don't like it. I'm also aware that I make videos that probably leave you feeling a bit depressed afterwards. God knows how many comments I've seen from people saying how bleak these topics can be, especially on my video about the loneliness epidemic in Japan. I want to say though that I don't do this so you feel bad about enjoying something or the world we live in general. I just think it's good to be aware of how crappy some things can be because I and many others think they need changing. It's much better to live with an uncomfortable truth than a comforting lie. I would never want to use my platform to make you think less about yourself, because even though this may be a parasocial relationship that you and I have, I think you still have value and you belong here, regardless of how much money or friends you have. We only have so much time on this planet, and it makes me happy that you gave some of yours to watching something that I put a lot of work into, regardless of whether you liked it or not. And hey, if you do want to talk a bit more, join the Discord, it's in the description. I'm pretty active there and I'm happy to talk to anyone. I know it's parasocial, but there's still some enjoyment to be had from human conversation. Boy, that got sappy. Or as the kids would say, wholesome. Nope. Stop using Gen Z lingo, it does not suit you. Influencers may live the kind of life that you would love to have, but they profit from reminding you of the things that you lack in your life right now, whether that's wealth, material goods, companionship, status, or even love. They may appreciate you, but you're not their friend, your revenue and clout. They're the friend that comes to you in their time of need, who you give advice to, but they never listen. They just want an opportunity to talk about themselves and not give much in return. They may be relatable. They may even make you feel seen and understood, but it's a toxic relationship. The only benefit that you receive is making another person feel better about themselves, and regardless of who you are, you deserve better than that. Well, thank you very much for watching. It seems kind of awkward asking for engagement after all this, but if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing the video, I would really appreciate it. I would also like to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters who donate $5 or more each month. And that goes to the following: Ashton the Platypus, CB Hart, Kevin Korber, Logan Roan, Sharfay or Sharfate, you'll have to let me know, Nostracon, Lexi Weiss, Fraser, Mariam, Mia Huxley, Floofpants, Tamara, my name is pronounced like Neve, Marius Stubberud, Your Sweet Pea, Catherine Engelman, and Steve Marr. Thank you all very much for supporting me, it really does go a long way. If you would like to join these wonderful people in the credits or the shout out, then you can do so by visiting me at patreon.com/Salari. You can also follow me on Twitter at SalariTV, and you can join us on our Discord so we can continue this parasocial relationship on there. You'll find the links in the description at the bottom. Thank you very much once again for watching. I appreciate you all so much, and I genuinely do mean that. But yeah, thank you so much once again. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you next time, where hopefully I have a new shirt. Bye bye.